Welcome to the CFB Dynasty Podcast with hosts Matt Knowles, Brian McElfresh, and Doug Gravely.
Hey everybody, how you doing out there in CFB Dynasty Podcast land? I'm here. BMAC is here. We both have power. BMAC, was there ever any point during Hurricane Milton where you got a little bit worried that you were going to have a little more damage or a little more power situations than you actually ended up with?
I wasn't necessarily worried about it. I knew power would go out at some point. I just kind of assumed it. So we had it go out for about an hour yesterday from like 7 to 8, and then it went out again at 9 and came back around 4:30 this morning. My daughter and I went on a little bike ride around the neighborhood and some trails around our house, and it's just generators running everywhere. We're just some of the fortunate ones, I think, to have power. I know there's a lot out around here.
I can tell you one of the things that you'll hear about hurricanes is it's like being stalked by a turtle. The build up to a hurricane is always a lot more insane than what normally happens for most people. And I was at a major convention in Tampa last weekend. I had at Spookala, I had 38 different celebs on the stage with me across the weekend. It was a great time, insane show. But leaving, I had to leave and get caught up in the evacuation traffic to get from Tampa to Ocala. So that was absolutely ludicrous. For those of you that just in perspective, the venue where I was at is only about 10 to 12 miles away from Tropicana Field that just had the roof blow off.
Yeah.
So right there, pretty much ground zero. So a 90-minute drive for me to get home from where the venue was took 4 hours because I was stuck in evacuation traffic. It was pretty nuts. So even though there's 3.3 million people in the state without power, there's 40,000, 50,000 people, something like that in the county that BMAC and I are in. Overall, most people came out unscathed. So, which is good. That way we can be here with you guys talking college fantasy football. One of the things we want to talk about this week, which we're really excited about, we're basically going to base the show around it this week, is BMAC had mentioned it last week, is the rankings drop, the new algorithm. And if you've looked at the rankings this week, they look wildly different than what you've seen previously. And we had a talk before Tuesday and Wednesday and the Maction games, and the rankings look so different that BMAC is like, man, I might want to be making some tweaks to this. But if you look at the things that have happened so far, the rankings have been pretty much on. BMAC, I don't know if you want to go to that right now, but sure. It's been really interesting seeing how what's in the rankings have actually played out.
Yeah, sure. So looking at Tyler Huff, who came in and the projection. So for those of you who might be new or maybe have missed it, the projection it obviously looks way different than my manual rankings over the years. But he would have never been up there at number one. But Jacksonville State put up 54 points. And if one of those other touchdowns turns from a rushing touchdown into a passing touchdown, he hits the mark. He finished with like just under 28 fantasy points, and he was projected 35. So that was really close. And then Caden Salter was projected 21.5, and he came in at 23. So maybe we just let this thing cook. I mean, it is based on real data. It's based on, how many fantasy points do you score for every point that the team scores? And then, it's looking at how many points they're going to score this week implied by the Vegas metrics and all that stuff. So, statistically, it's pretty close to really good. Again, where it lacks is like right now, it doesn't know that Nick Singleton didn't play last week. So he's got a little bit of a downgrade. I think he's like 35th when he should probably be more like 20th. But right now I'm letting it ride, letting it do its thing. We will make those adjustments in the future for sure. But yeah, man, it's been pretty good. And I don't know what to think about it yet.
It does look wildly different than what else is out there, but that's good. That just goes to show that CFB Dynasty is trying to build the rankings in a little bit different way that's based on the data. As you said, there are still some things to tweak. We talked about it before we went online, especially in a situation with quarterbacks. If you look at the rankings, they're much, much deeper, and people have been asking about that. But you look at the rankings, and right now, 93 and 94, you've got Nico Iamaleava and Cedric Bailey at 93 and 94. Nico, if you go back and look at the stats, he hasn't been putting up a whole lot. I mean, you think that he's, part of one of the best offenses in college football. But one of the things that the system right now is unable to account for is when a quarterback does so good that they're out at the end of the first half, or in a situation like Ced Bailey. Ced Bailey has not been the starter. He has come in twice for an injured Grayson McCall and then started after that. So the system doesn't really have a way to be able to account for that, which would be very difficult to figure out a way to account for that. But you just keep those things in mind that, someone like Ced Bailey, especially, he came in relief last week and had 272 yards passing.
Yeah. I think the best we'll get to on that front will be using games played but even if you've played half a game or if you go in and you play a snap, like there's not a ton that we can do unless we're able to get, snap percentage data and all that stuff and kind of bake it in. And I would like to get to that point, but it's not data that's readily available to us. That's when we've 10x'd our subscriber count and I'm able to afford live real-time data.
Because that
will be legit.
Yeah, because that's talking about, right now, I know one of the things, and that you and I have talked about this as commissioners in fantasy football, that the more you can get it to where there is data based only without manual intervention for scoring and different things like that is where you want to get to.
Yep.
And right now the data is based on the least amount of things that are having to be manually entered every week. So when you get to that point, like you said, there's a lot of stuff that's going to have to be captured through some kind of manual means, and the ability to do that right now just isn't there.
Yeah, but we'll be able to figure out ways to do that. But it is weird. I've done these rankings manually for 10 years plus now, ish. I don't remember how many years. It's been close to that.
It's been a while.
So a couple weeks of not having to manually do the rankings and having the algorithm kind of do it is interesting. But yeah, someone like Nico has been disappointing. He has not finished as a QB1 yet this season, meaning he's not been in the top 12 all year long. He's had his best finish was week 2. He finished 18th. His second best finish was 39th. And so we'll see. It's interesting how kind of, run heavy Tennessee has been from, a team perspective, but obviously a fantasy perspective too.
Well, I think we should have just go straight to what the actual rankings are that the system is putting up there for quarterbacks. Just go look at that top 10 right now, which, as you've already mentioned early, Jalen Milroe is at 9. But just look at the rankings right there. And there's some names we've seen up there at the top before, but other names, Bryson Daly up there at number 2, Tyler Huff at 1. That takes a lot of guts. I don't think anybody out there, human-wise, manually, would be putting those two guys at the top of the list, which is pretty dang cool.
Yeah, Daly I picked up in a couple leagues, but look at his last 3 weeks, and this is where it comes from. He finished QB4 in week 4, QB10 in week 5, and QB5 in week 6. So he's been consistently good, and man, that offense throws it a little bit, but of course a lot of it's coming from the ground, but solid so far, very consistent starting quarterback for fantasy, surprisingly.
I love seeing Mateer at number 6 versus Fresno, and the reason I bring that up is because you got the over/under of 61.5 there, which is one of the highest over/unders in the country this week. That game is set up to be a game. There's going to just be a ton of points coming out of there because Washington State has the ability to do it. Fresno State, when they're not getting whipped by New Mexico, have the ability to do it. So that game has the potential to be one of the highest scoring games of the week.
Yeah, it's a 32-29 implied final score. So yeah, we've got him projected right at 29 fantasy points this week. And yeah, a great start. A great start. He's been one of the most consistent finishers on the season. If you flip over to the consistency tool so far this year, he's quarterback 1. He's finished 2, 6, 13, QB3 in week 4. And then he dropped off a little bit to QB 37 before last week. So we'll see how they come back this week. I think and so much of his production comes on the ground too. But some of the stuff's wild, man. Cam Ward, another one that's just absolutely killed it. There's a lot of hype around Cam Ward in Miami, and we bought into it, but man, maybe not enough. Like he's right now definitely a top 10 fantasy quarterback.
Cam Ward is an interesting case study. If you've watched Cam Ward, when he looks good, you're like, this is what's going to make him a first-round pick in the NFL. When he looks bad, you're like, this is why this guy's going to get cut from a team in the NFL. Like if he can figure out which Cam Ward is the real Cam Ward, kind of like Eminem, will the real Cam Ward please stand up? Then you're going to know, are you going to have somebody that's going to be a generational talent? Or are you going to have somebody that's going to flame out? But when he's good, he is really good.
Decisions, laid across the field, across the body, that kind of stuff. Not seeing a linebacker sitting in his zone, that kind of stuff has got him in some trouble. But he's got full buy-in. The coaching staff obviously is going to let him do his thing. When you have a gunslinger, that could be great for fantasy, obviously, because they're going to be in some games because of some bad choices. But that means he's going to stay in the game and be throwing the ball. And obviously he's great with his legs too. So yeah, we had Huff there, Daly there, Veltkamp, number 3 start this week. That game is tonight, home against UTEP. He's projected to score just under 33 fantasy points for a Western Kentucky team that's supposed to be in a beatdown. It's a 37 to 18.5 implied final score there. Jordan McLeod, he's been consistently up there. He's at QB4. And then Carson Beck, who normally wouldn't be up there, is up there at QB5 this week. He's averaging 21.5 fantasy points per game, but because he's such a high percentage of their offense, they're projected to score 44. So it's one of those things where if he does play the whole game and passing remains as high a percentage of the offense as it has been, that'll be interesting to see. But last week they ran ETN quite a bit. He was a big part of the game plan, and I think there was a shift there after their loss to Alabama to kind of focus in a little bit more on the running game and get ETN more touches. It looked like they were trying to force it there. And Mississippi State, their opponent this week, traveling to Georgia, it's completely outmatched. Florida, far worse team, was able to do whatever they wanted against that Mississippi State defense. So Georgia will be able to do what they want. Sadly, another receiver down from getting arrested this week. But I think ETN will be able to do, again, anything against that D-line at Mississippi State is pretty terrible. So we'll see how long Beck plays, but I would not be shocked if he didn't even play in the fourth quarter.
And I know if there's one thing that you want to be able to do on this podcast is to sing the praises of Trevor Etienne. So I'm glad that that's given you a little bit of reason to be able to sing his praises.
Well, I did end up starting him last week. At the end of the show, I was taking some of the questions there from, or I posed a question in the audience and you answered on who I would start in my flex, and it was Mahdi. And then I ended up trading Mahdi like not too long after the show, making a deal with Mike Davis. The player that I got in return, Mario Anderson, was on a bye. So I ended up starting ETN, and he was great. So right now, fine with it. In a few weeks when Florida plays Georgia and ETN is running all over the Gators, likely, I won't be fine with it. But for now, it's okay.
Well, and for those of you that have been asking for deeper rankings, the quarterback rankings go to like 112 this week. So quarterback rankings are way out there. And I'll tell you right now, if you're considering starting somebody that is that deep into the rankings, especially a quarterback, I definitely want to be playing you in fantasy this week, because you should not be starting a quarterback that's that low. But at least you can see, we just talked about Nico, said Bailey down there in the 90s. I know Maddox Madsen from Boise State is way down the rankings as well. Just goes to show that a lot of these names that you might see higher in the rankings, the stats aren't bearing out that they should be that high.
Yep. Right.
All right. Why don't we roll over to the running backs? While we do that, we do have one comment in the chat right now. Ethan Surdock. So, hey, listen, this is a college fantasy football podcast, but we do play a lot of pro fantasy football. So you know what? We'll answer a question right there. He says, I have Kittle. When he got hurt, I traded for McBride from someone who had Bowers. Do I start McBride or Kittle this week? Honestly, I feel like you don't sit Kittle. I'm just sorry. You don't sit Kittle. That offense has got too many weapons. I know they had a little bit of a hiccup this past week, but you got to start Kittle, man. That's what I think. What do you think, B-Mac?
McBride, I like, so he's been getting targets. I'd roll. I think I'd roll Trey McBride in that offense.
Well, you know what, though? That's good. So we've helped that person. We've helped him to have absolutely no additional clarity on this. So that's good, though.
Yeah. All right. So running back, in no surprise to anyone, Genty is number one projection, 35 fantasy points, like 9 more than anyone else on this list. So they're favored. They're on the road at Hawaii, which is always tough, just from a travel standpoint. But the road game always the run game always travels on the road. So it's funny just to see the point difference between Genty and everyone else on this list is so vast, and he's averaging 40.8 fantasy points per game on the season. So
he's averaging like 11 yards a carry too. 11 yards a carry. If you look at, I don't have it handy right now, but it was like the last 3 running backs to win the Heisman. And you look at his stats where they were at the same point, and it's just like he is obliterating every single one of them. And his schedule only gets easier. Again, like you said, Hawaii being away is always a tough task for anybody just because of the travel out there. But he's a freak of nature right now. If he can stay uninjured, I can't see how anybody's going to unseat him for the Heisman.
Yeah, Genty, absolutely. So he's there. He's going to be a staple at number 1. Braden Sloan. Now, I haven't got to watch Ball State yet, but he's in there projected as the number 2 start of the week. They're playing against Kent State, who is the 134th ranked rushing defense from a fantasy perspective. And he's projected 26.5 fantasy points this week. Any thoughts there on him or Jaden Nixon from Western Michigan, who hosts Akron, the 115th rushing defense, projected at 25?
I can tell you right now, both the number 2 and the number 3, I haven't got a chance to watch either one of them. So to see their names up there at the top of the list is pretty impressive. Now, Jaden Nixon is probably a name that we should have been paying attention to. I just pulled his stats up right now, and he's got 32, 21, and 31 points the last 3 weeks. He's got 6 touchdowns. So he has jumped up there. So he is somebody that we should be paying attention to. And I think that it's good that the system has said, hey, you knuckleheads, you need to be paying attention to him. He's a top 3 running back this week. The numbers are bearing it out.
And then, Mario Anderson, who, again, we've listed him for weeks as a trade for target because they had a tough schedule early on. But like now through the fantasy playoffs, like he's got such a light schedule, and he will be a staple up here in the top 5 for the rest of the season if he stays healthy. So Mario Anderson in there at 23 fantasy points projected. Same with RJ Harvey. They're hosting a more difficult opponent. UCF is hosting Cincinnati this week. And then Marquez Cooper on the road against Wyoming. It's a tight spread, so we expect him to be in the game. It's going to be low scoring, but both teams are going to be running the ball, and he's projected just under 23. Your boy, so ETN is there at 10, after that game he had last week. Multiple targets through the air, solid game.
Well, who would have thought? Who would have thought Trey Stewart from Jacksonville State would be at 7? Who would have thought that 2 Jacksonville State players would be in the top 10 in fantasy production for this week? And since Jacksonville State has already played, and these rankings were made before last night's game, let's go take a look at what he did in a 54-13 game. 21 attempts, 118 yards, 2 touchdowns, plus he added a 32-yard receiving touchdown. So in the last 3 weeks, he's got 21.6, 37.4, 33.5. So Trey Stewart has shown why he needs to be up there in the top 10 as well. So I'm glad that the algorithm pulled him out and threw him up in the top of the rankings.
It's crazy, man. It's crazy. I wouldn't have had him ranked that high. But yeah, that's nuts. He killed it. What a game.
I think it also shows when you get later into the season and you're now into conference play. That's why you've got teams like Ball State and Western Michigan, Jacksonville State, Ohio, that are all represented in the top 10, because you get those teams that are playing in conference. These are not beatdown games anymore. These are not where you've got, Alabama's crushing people or Tennessee crushing people. They're playing against teams that are a little more on their level. And that's where these stats are going to be deciding who's going to make the playoffs and who might make a championship run.
All right, so let me get back in there and put that back up on the screen.
I think Omarion Hampton being at 22 in the rankings makes sense. He's a little bit lower than you've seen him previously, but I think that the stats are showing that makes sense. Nick Singleton is down at 35. One that's interesting is Henry Parrish. Henry Parrish at 38 via the stats this week.
Yeah, big drop off.
Big drop off, but you know what though? I mean, we're showing you that these stats aren't lying right now. So I love seeing the way that the algorithm has placed this. And you made a comment earlier that I thought was really good. Want to make sure we don't gloss over it. You said an implied score where you're taking the Vegas over under, and you're taking the over under the points, the Vegas over under and the point spread, and taking that implication of if you've got a over under a 64 and then the point spread is a team by 10. Well, obviously that means that those two things together is going to imply a certain score. So I think that's something that people need to pay attention to as well. If Vegas is saying it's a 35 point over under, then there's not a lot of points to go around. So, pay attention to those two things. Those two things are a part of the factor, are a part of the calculation.
Yeah, and you look at the consistency tool here, which again, if you're on the site and it's under the rankings still. So if you ever want to get to the post where we have the rankings every week when it launches, typically on Tuesday, especially now that we have Tuesday games. So we got to get those rankings out early. But the rankings will be right on the CFF page. And then we have this consistency tool there for quarterbacks, running backs, and wide receivers where you can see how they're trending. And while Henry Parrish came out like super hot in week 2, he finishes as the RB1 for college fantasy on the week. And then he backs it up with an RB7. Remember, most people, including us, like most of the intel coming into the season was that it was going to be Ulysses Bentley. And like, this is one of those things too, where Ole Miss fans are confused. Like, where is he at? So since then, he's not been a starter, essentially. He's finished RB 65, 51, 68. And Ole Miss has struggled a little bit. Last week was a good win for them. But in terms of the running game and Henry Parrish's output, it's not been there the last 3 weeks. So it's one of those things where you've seen the potential, but consistency matters a ton. And are you going to trust him to start this week? The tool is down on him a bit, and that's what it's built to do. It's built to bake in what has he done so far this season in terms of percentage of the offense's production from a fantasy perspective, And then this week, yeah, just down the list quite a bit.
All right, so why don't we roll over to the wide receivers? Top of the list is somebody that's almost the Ashton Genty of the wide receiver core. Nick Nash, he's always in the top 1 or 2. But you go down the list, and there's not a lot of names that are normally at the top of the list, which is very interesting. Again, you look at most of the names up there, group of 5s, Caden McDonald, Keyshawn Johnson, who is Western Kentucky, is finally deciding to find a single wide receiver to actually do something, as it clearly is not Dalvin Smith. Krishawn McCray, that's one that's interesting. I'm very interested to know how the algorithm pulled him out and put him at 4, because when he's playing against teams that are on his caliber, he's getting a lot of targets, 10, 13, 11 targets. When he's playing against teams that are outside of his caliber, at Tennessee, at Penn State, he did absolutely nothing. So I guess basically it's showing that when he's playing within the group of 5 category, that he's going to be getting a lot more play. His last game, 5 receptions, 188 yards and 2 touchdowns against Eastern Michigan. I think that's why the algorithm pulled him up there. But he's going to be one to see if that crystal ball, so to speak, actually plays out for him.
I have Keyshawn Johnson. So in our home league, we get 3 pickups on the whole season, and that's designed to make the league difficult with 12 teams. So those pickups are calculated choices. Normally, I wait till later in the year to pick up some players, but this year I was all in on, I'm all in on trying to win the title this year and make as deep a run as I can. So I did a couple weeks ago pick up Keyshawn Johnson from Western Kentucky. It seems like he's become the man in terms of target share at Western Kentucky, and that's what you want. You want the targets to be in your favor, and they also have a great schedule going throughout the rest of the season. So he would be a trade for target if I didn't have him, but I want to see it play out. I'll be watching that game for sure tonight, especially because of the weather and soccer canceled for me, so no coaching happening. I'll be watching Western Kentucky UTEP to see if that carries on, because if it does, it's a big hit in that offense with the schedule coming up. Royals, by the way, he made an appearance last week. His team didn't necessarily, but this is what we wanted to see from a couple guys. We'll start with Royals, who finished wide receiver 1 last week, a bye week before that, and he was wide receiver 20 week 4. But that was a really, really slow, pitiful start to the season where he was 80th, 191st, 199th. So Royals came alive. A lot of these guys, Horton got healthy. He didn't show up there because he's not in the top 100 or so. But let me go back to him on the rankings here. We've got Torrey Horton as wide receiver 16. And yeah, because he only has 51 fantasy points on the season, he's not in the top 100 or so. Maybe I'll expand that out. But big game last week in a tough win for Colorado State. If I remember correctly, they won in overtime. But I was watching a lot of games, so maybe I'm mixing that one up. But I know that went into overtime. So a great one potentially this week. It's going to be another close, high-scoring game, and he's projected to score 18. It wouldn't surprise me if he finished as a top 5 type of player this week. And then the guy that's been on our list, Ricky White, for a long time. Let's see if we pull him up here on the consistency tool. With the new quarterback coming in, he's finished 2 weeks now, wide receiver 5 and wide receiver 10. We listed him 2 weeks ago on the show as a big trade for target because of that switch, and it's definitely paid off for anyone that was able to make that happen. I said it last week. I failed trying to make that trade happen, but hey, hopefully some of you guys made it work before he started taking off again.
Yeah, and I think one of the most interesting ones is if you look at the tool, it's got Jeremiah Smith at 73.
It's interesting, but Egbuka had a 2 or 3 touchdowns last week. I think Jeremiah Smith had 1. I can't quite remember, but it's based again on percentage of the offense, and he's been really good. He's averaging 20 a game, but against Oregon this week, they're projected to score a lot less than normal. So his stats, are kind of pulled down a little bit there. Implied final score would be an Ohio State victory, 28 to 24.5 this week.
And again, it just goes to show that, statistically and with the different formulas in the background, that what we might see with our eyes might be a little bit different than what might show on the sheet. And it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out for the rest of the season. Who's high, who's low. It'll be fun. It'll be fun to see how this actually works.
Yeah, and it's a tool. So here it's here to for us to use when we're setting our lineups or making DFS projections, where DFS is where we'll need to get to sooner than later on. Yeah, you can use this to set your lineups now, but if we're able to kind of take our points projection, if we like it, assuming that we're going to check this out, get your feedback, and I would love to know too, like, hey, do you like this projection metric? I know a lot of people asked for it. A lot of people wanted to see deeper rankings, and this allows us to get deeper rankings specifically for DFS. But essentially, if we're able to take into consideration the FanDuel price, the DraftKings price, then we'll get down to here's like the best value in terms of points per dollar that you're projected to get, which can set some lineups for you. I'm going to try and play with that some this weekend if I have time, but that could be where we go from a DFS perspective, which would be a great tool, provided that it makes money for us and all that stuff.
I think one guy that we'll pull up just because we've talked about him a lot is Kevin Concepcion for NC State. He is all the way down at number 82, and you want to talk about the data really bearing that that's the right ranking for him right now. Casey Concepcion, he's still getting a ton of targets. He's still averaging in the last 4 weeks double-digit targets. But his overall yards and his overall effectiveness are really, really down. He's averaging, 1.38 yards per reception, which is not what you want out of a guy that's supposed to be the number one. Obviously, we'll talk about it a little bit when we get to news and notes. The quarterback position at NC State has been under absolute fire because of some dreadful injuries that have happened. But his effectiveness in the offense, even though they're still trying to get him the ball, just hasn't been there. So if you've got him, it's kind of hard to start him when he's been in the single digits for the last 5 weeks.
On the flip side, so I view this as an opportunity, when the fantasy owner who spent a high draft pick on Concepcion is kind of down and feeling negative about it. Maybe he's looking to get some value. Would it be a trade for target? Do you see the NC State quarterback situation getting better as the rest of the season goes, or is he just stay away?
Honestly, I would still go get him because of the player he is. What happened last year wasn't an accident.
No, he came out this season hot too.
Yeah, he's a great player. He's from an athletic standpoint one of the best in the country. I think that when you're talking about going to a true freshman quarterback because of all the injuries, even though Ced Bailey is a great player, still has to get comfortable in the offense. And you're talking about a true freshman going to a true sophomore. I still think from a talent perspective, I would still want to have him on the bench so that way you can see if the offense gets under control, he's probably going to be the guy that has the best chance to break out.
Yeah, Brett agrees with you. And so he came out as wide receiver 6 week 1. I remember that game. And then he was hobbled a bit, right? Going into week 2. I don't know how healthy he's been. But
yeah, he left the game 3 times with an injury in one game.
Yeah, he's finished wide receiver 194 week 2, then 207, 220, 152, 174. If you've watched college football, you know the player that he is. Incredible player, 100% going to be playing and starting on Sundays at some point. But he's that kind of talent. He will get the ball. I agree with you, Matt. He would be a trade for target for me right now if I can go get him. Like looking at that, the last 5 weeks he's been unstartable, but they're probably starting him and just being consistently disappointed. So, hey, if you can get him and put him in your flex, I mean, that would be great value.
So why don't we roll down to tight ends while we do that? We had a couple of comments in the chat. Morgax's Play says, have no fear, I'm here. What's going on, man? Brett Pagney, hey, Matt and Brian. I like that you guys are adjusting as you go. I know that one of the things there is that BMAC is always trying to make what is produced by CFB Dynasty have the most intelligence behind the scenes and the least amount of human intervention as possible. And it's really good to be able to see that some of these things that he's been talking about for a while are finally getting to be integrated into the background. This is the kind of thing that is going to help those of you that are out there that are like, do I want to invest my dollar in a subscription to CFB Dynasty? This is what's going to take it truly to the next level. As we say, we are not going to spend this kind of a deep time looking at the rankings every single week, but we wanted to show you guys how different it is in the rankings right now with these new things added in the background.
While it's cool, it's also disgusting. We scroll down to tight ends and you see these rankings. There's no way, after what Harold Fannin did to Penn State, there's nobody I'm sitting him against. Nobody ever the rest of the season. And the algorithms got him projected as number 2 this week against NIU. And they're at home, Bowling Green. But they're 4th against tight end so far this season. And, they are projected to win. We've got him at 21.51 projected points, which is incredible for any tight end. I'm playing against him this week in the home league. But Tanner Koziol, number 1 projected tight end this week. They're on the road at Kent State, who's 127th against tight ends. He's averaging 9.5 less points per game than Harold Fannin on the season, but it's got him coming out at a 23 with Ball State scoring more than they normally score. So
yeah, and I think part of it there too is that Koziel is averaging double-digit targets. He's got 9 receptions 3 games in a row, and I think what you said earlier, I think the difference here is because you got playing against Kent State versus playing against NIU, who did have the big upset at Notre Dame. So I think that is probably the reason why that's there. But like you said, if you've got Koziel and Fannin on your team, one, good to you. But also, I agree with you. I'm not sitting him. I don't care who you have. I don't care if you got Gadsden. He's going to be in my starting lineup every single week. So if you've got
screw Harold these Fannin, rankings.
If you got Harold Fannin, good for you. Good for you.
Lawson Lucky, I like him a lot, and he's coming on as the next tight end for Georgia going into the season. You had the transfer over from Stanford, and you had Delp there, who was a really big time recruit. But Lucky, I just kept hearing about him from different people over the years, where he kept getting hurt, but he's like special talent, and he looks the part, man. Any one of these days could be his breakout day. So in DFS, etc., I love Lawson Lucky, and he's coming in projected 8.5 fantasy points as number tight end 14. But some other regulars up there, and the data's there for you guys to kind of go around. You can search it, and we've got 78 tight ends in there listed with point projections.
Well, good stuff. So that's the way the new rankings look. Obviously, if you want to be able to go in there and maneuver around within that or the consistency tool, you need to have a subscription to CFB Dynasty website. This is the time to do it. You're talking about the second half of the season. We're getting into those make or break games that are possibly going to give you a position in the playoffs or not. So if you haven't subscribed to CFBDynasty.com, you want to go up there and do that now, so that way you can take your college fantasy football experience to the next level, just like me and BMAC are going to do. All right. With that being said, BMAC, do you want to head on over to the news and notes?
News and notes around college football.
All right, so we're going to make this really quick this week. Nick Anderson for Oklahoma, he's out for several more weeks. If you've been waiting on him this year, get him out of there. Cut ties. He has done nothing this year, especially in a seasonal league. He is probably just going to amount to disappointment on your bench, taking up a roster spot. Also for Oklahoma, Deion Burks is questionable. Andrew Anthony is out, so that's their wide receiver core there. Tennessee, Brew McCoy and Squirrel White are both probable versus UF, while Deontay Thornton is questionable. Henry Parrish, running back for Ole Miss, probable, while Matt Jones is doubtful. Eugene Wilson, wide receiver for UF. He's not on the injury report. BMAC will ask you afterwards if you trust that diagnosis or not. Quinn Ewers is likely going to be the starter at QB for Texas this week. Again, what do you think about that over top of over Manning? Raleigh Brown, running back Arizona State, he's active this week. Taylor Green, quarterback Arkansas, is day-to-day, and Grayson McCall, quarterback NC State, still in concussion protocol. If you did not see the hit that he took this past week, probably one of the scariest hits that has ever happened in college football. I'm going to be shocked to see him come back and play this week. It's probably just as scary as any of the hits that ever happened to Tua Tagovailoa. But that's your news and notes for this week. Real quick hitters there. But let's go back real quick, BMAC. First, let's start with Grayson McCall. Did you see the hit that he took in that game?
I didn't see it.
Go look at the hit. Grayson McCall. The thing that's crazy about this hit, which was unfortunate, he was running. He got to about the 5-yard line, and when he got hit so hard that his helmet popped off and flew the other direction. Mouthpiece flew off. He's down on the ground at about the 5-yard line, fumbled, obviously, and you've got offensive linemen standing there screaming for them to come out because he was knocked unconscious. But the ball was picked up, and you've got a guy running it back the other direction who gets tackled at the 2 on the other end of the field. So you have to delay medical personnel coming out onto the field to be able to take care of him. But he was taken off on a stretcher. He did not look good. Obviously, C.J. Bailey's going to be starting there at NC State. I can't see McCall coming back from that injury. That was one of the scariest things. You definitely need to go take a look. It's one of the craziest things to see his body go one way and his helmet just go flying the other way. A lot of people are wondering why there was no targeting call because looks like some helmet to helmet there. But it's probably one of the scariest hits that's happened in college football in a long time where somebody didn't have a broken leg or something like that.
Yeah. Maybe it's age or I don't know what's different, but when we were younger playing video games or whatever, that was like the play when you could, as a linebacker, pop off the other team's helmet in the video game. That's where it's at. But yeah, I view that stuff, quite a bit differently these days. We're still, we want it to be football, but we also want to have these players be able to live and have a life after football, that kind of stuff.
So what do you think about Eugene Wilson being off of the injury report? If you have him on your team, are you even thinking about playing him this week, even as a wide receiver 4? Hey, look at that. We got a special guest in the house. What's up? What's up, big man? Gunnar, why don't you say hey to everybody? Look at that. What's up, Gunnar? How you doing, man?
So anyways, he was in warm-ups last week and he looked perfect, like perfectly fine. And then I put him in my lineup in one of the leagues that I have, Wilson, and just didn't play. Like there was nothing that he couldn't do in warm-ups last week. So it's a wait and see. He's one of those where you have to be by a computer, ready to make your changes if you need to make your changes, but you got to watch that one because this is crunch time. It's middle of the season. Or beyond middle of the season. This is playoff run here for your college fantasy team. So it's hard to say, but he's off the list. Is he one of those guys that's going to quietly redshirt the rest of the season and keep another year of eligibility? Who knows? It's wait and see. It's definitely a risk if you start him.
All right, so that's the news and notes, and we're just going to go right down the list right now. I think we might need to hit another drop because it's time to talk about the brisket lock.
Oh, man, is it that time already?
It's time for the brisket lock.
All right, so this season so far, I've been having a little bit better luck with the brisket
Don't
lock, but this past week, not so fast, my friend. BMAC is like, there's still some season left to go, and he is going to start taking that mantle back. So last week, BMAC said Darius Taylor, Minnesota, and he crushed it. 25 carries, 144 yards, and then 5 receptions for 56 yards, 22.5 fantasy points, didn't score any touchdowns, but when you account for 200 yards, that is a brisket lock performance right there.
Yeah, and not to toot my own horn, but I called exactly how the game would go. I said Minnesota's going to get this upset, and they did. They got the upset against USC, and they were going to ride Darius Taylor doing it. So that was a good one. Yeah, if he scores a touchdown or two, it's lights out there, but good brisket luck.
I picked Alonzo Barnett from James Madison. He actually was very disappointing this past week. They lost in a 21-19 game after he had 2 of the most impressive performances of the fantasy season coming in. He was 20 of 47, so he was only like at 40-something% completion percentage, which is unacceptable. 251 yards passing, 49 yards rushing, even though he accounted for 300 yards. That's not what you want. And 1 rushing touchdown. That's not what you want out of somebody who you potentially are going to start as a quarterback. That is not going to make him a top 12 quarterback in anybody's book. So Alonzo Barnett, he gets to stand and watch Darius Taylor eat the brisket this week. He doesn't get any, and he just has to watch somebody else partake of that goodness. So BMAC clearly with the brisket lock victory in week 6.
Maybe I'll make a brisket this weekend. It sounds great. It sounds great.
So with that said, who are the people that are going to be looking to potentially partake of the week 7 brisket? Who do you got as your brisket lock this week, BMAC?
I've got Trevor Pena, who wide receiver for Syracuse, and he's averaging 20 a game, but really hasn't done great since week 2. He was wide receiver 10 week 1, wide receiver 13 week 2, and then since then his best finish was wide receiver 69 week 4. So and he's been 101 and 113th the 2 weeks after that. So bounce back week for him. They're playing against NC State, it's been a struggle. So I've watched Syracuse a few times now. I know how much they like to throw the ball. McCord, Syracuse, what they've put together this season has been truly impressive. Let's get a bounce back for Pena this week.
All right, so I'm going with Malik Sherrod from Fresno State, somebody who was very, very high in the rankings early in the season. He's dealt with some injuries. Fresno State has had some surprising losses, like against New Mexico. But if you go back and look at Washington State, and obviously Genty is crushing everybody, but the Boise State offense really dismantled Washington State's defense in that game. And I think this has a possibility of being that game for Fresno State. I think there's a chance for there to be a bounce back or a rebound for Sherrod. So he's going to be my brisket lock for this week. And hopefully that Fresno State offense can show that New Mexico game was just a little bit of a fluke. So that's the brisket locks for this week. Do you want to go really quick over the home league, the open league, and the Masters League, since we didn't get a chance to do it last week?
Yeah, let's go real quick. I'll throw those back on the screen, and we'll start in the open league where Moonlight Waffles and Gators win there. Both 9-3, both clearly looking like they're going to be making that jump into the Masters next season in this promotion relegation format that we hope to expand going into next season. And but really, nobody is out of it. We got 16 people. We're playing 2 games a week. So with that being said, the worst record's 4-8, as you can see on the screen, and it's a lot of parity. I like how our little team is shaping out and getting healthy. One of the excuses, I guess, dare I say, injury, Torrey Horton, first round pick in a couple of these leagues or a few of these leagues, just finally getting healthy. So I like where we're at to maybe make a run. It's been a pitiful start to the season there at 4-8, but
well, and like you said,
anybody can get in it.
The Masters and the Open League both play doubleheaders every week. So a team that's 4-8, if you're 6-6, you're in that 6th playoff spot right now. So All you need is a couple of weeks where you get doubleheader wins there, and you can be right up there in the thick of things.
Over in the Masters, really similar. Oaktown surprisingly is 2-10. Maverick at 3-9 there. So it's going to be a tough but not impossible finish for them to get up into the playoffs. But to maintain the status of being in the Masters, you've got to finish in the top 6 and make the playoffs. And, here's a similar story where, another Torrey Horton team, he's getting healthy. Some other, waiver wire selections. I feel really good about where I'm at to close out the season. I'm at 5-7, tough start, but excited for a good finish there. But yeah, you're there at 6-6, a game better than me, and that puts you in the top 5 right now, but can't let off the gas because any
Absolutely
week could be the difference, and it will be because we play each other this week.
Yeah, my dropping 2 games last week was brutal for me. That was not fun because I was up there in 3rd or 4th before last week, so my team needs to pick it up. As you can see, I'm one of the better scoring teams in the league. I'm actually 4th in scoring, I believe. Actually, you know what? I'm actually 5th because the Southeast Northwest U is one of the top scoring teams. Is all the way down there at the bottom. I mean, that's rough when you score that much.
Yeah,
And you're down at the bottom. That sucks.
That does suck. That's where I love the new trend of you play one game head to head, and then you play one game for points against the rest of the league. So if you're in the top half of the league, you get a win. If you're in the bottom half in points that week, you get a loss. I love that new trend in fantasy football. Hasn't made its way to Fantrax yet as an option, but when it does, we'll be voting on it in our league.
All right. So my big thing this week is that my entire bench is on a bye. So I pretty much am starting who I can start, and that's about it. So why don't we head on over to the CFB Dynasty Home League?
Home League, it's real similar. It's a lot of parity. We got one team that's 8-0. Uncle Joe, shout out to you. And shout out to our rankings for helping him be 8-0. Really, it's just a shout out to us.
I can't. Something is wrong. Uncle Joe is 8-0, man. That's we're doing something wrong. There's no reason. I don't know if there's sympathy being played, but how in the world is that even possible?
And then Doug there, UTSA at 0-8, and he knew it was coming into it. It was a rebuilding year. He was top heavy last year and lost a punch, so it's hard to win consistently every year in this league. But a lot of parity, a lot of people still in it. I'd say anywhere from Gordy at Arizona State. He's 2-5 right now, but I still think he's got a good enough team to make it in the playoffs. Just needs a run. So anyone in the top 10, I feel like can make a run at the playoffs in this league.
So here's a question we have for you guys out there in the chat on Discord. Doug is 0-8, and his team, as you can see, is absolutely getting obliterated from a scoring perspective. Question we have for you is, will Doug win a game this year, or is Doug going to go winless? And I don't know if we've ever had a team go winless in college.
Oh, we have.
Winless?
And Uncle Joe. Yeah.
That's cool. Have we ever had somebody outside of Uncle Joe go winless?
I think so too. Actually, if you can entertain everyone for 38 seconds.
Well, so Brett Pagnew's over here saying he loves the charade call. He also says this is such an awesome show. Brett, thank you so much for the compliments. That's why we do this. We want to be able to have people be able to be interactive and enjoy the show as it's going down. He also gives a plus for Uncle Joe. Brett says he believes in Doug. He will be back strong next year, but he does not say he believes in Doug this year. He does say, yes, he's going to get a win, but he believes in him in 2025. Brett, do you believe in him in 2024, or is it just a wash?
So Joe is the only one. Uncle Joe's the only one to go winless. And it was, in fairness to him, it was in COVID year. We only had 8 games. He went 0-8. So no one else has done it. We've had plenty of ones along the way, but he's the only over.
Good stuff. Good stuff. So that's the quick little look in on the Open, on the Masters, and then on the Home League. So good stuff there. So why don't we quickly go to it? There's a couple of questions that we had out there in the peanut gallery. Remember, if you guys want us to talk about your start and sits or any kind of questions you have, make sure you get them in the Discord, get them into the chat, so that way we can prepare and talk about them. So we got Todd who's out there. He says, Caden Samanza versus Kent State, Braden Schrager versus Boise State, or Ethan Vasco versus James Madison.
Let's see. Vasco is projected. Let me go.
Yeah, what do the rankings say? I think the rankings are going to be who we decide this where.
All right, let's take a look and see how we would use the tool. Vasco is ranked 77th. He's projected 14 this week.
I think Schrager is going to be a tough one. Schrager versus Boise State is going to be a tough start. So I think Samanza is probably going to be the one, without even looking at the rankings, but the rankings are probably going to have him higher on the list.
Yeah, Schrager is projected 19.5. Samanza is projected 28. Yeah, he's the clear cut starter. If it was close, I'd make a judgment call, but in that scenario, Samanza all the way. He's the number 7 start of the week this week.
All right, then Sir Mocha, start 2 out of the following: Anthony Tyus, Dean Connors, Jaden Nixon, and then Braden Sloan. So who do you got there? I think we already talked about Jaden Nixon, did we not?
Let's see. Yeah, Tyus is projected 20. He's a top 10 start, so I like him. Who else did we have on the list there?
Anthony Tyus.
Yep, Tyus is number 9.
Dean Connors.
Connors is number 27, projected 16. That's a really good start this week against UTSA.
And then Jaden Nixon, and then Braden Sloan.
Nixon is RB3 this week, projected 25. And then who is the last one?
Braden Sloan.
Oh my goodness, he's RB2 this week. So goodness gracious. I mean, you've got some great starts this week.
Yeah. Yes.
Man, given how the algorithm's done so far this week, I'd go Sloan and Nixon. It's going to be hard to sit Tyus. He's been really good. All good starts. I would just roll with Sloan and Nixon, I feel like.
Yeah, Sloan and Nixon being the number 2 and number 3. I think that when you're saying that these are going to be the 2 best potential performances outside of Ashton Genty, you got to go with the tool. I think you have no choice. I think you got to say those 2 guys.
Yeah. Oh, Brett disagrees. He's going Schrager. And he says he's crazy.
He said he's starting Schrager above
Sloan,
Jackson Dart?
Yeah, Sloan is against the 134th defense against the run, and Nixon is against the 115th. So I like those 2 this week. We'll roll with the algorithm.
All right, well, good stuff. So that has been the CFB Dynasty podcast for this week. If you guys are out there anywhere in the Southeast, anywhere from Asheville, we can't forget about the fact people still out there trying to recover from Hurricane Helene.
No doubt.
Hope you guys stay safe. Hope you guys were able to avoid any major damage. I've had some people that I know where their fence flew away or things like that. I had one guy that I know that said a tree fell 1 foot from his house. Oh. He said if it would have fallen 1 foot farther, it would have taken out one of his bedrooms. So, hopefully you stayed safe, and hopefully you're going to be able to watch some college football this week and be able to come back with us next week and talk about the fallout from week 7. On behalf of Brian McElfresh, my name is Matt Knowles. We hope you've enjoyed watching the CFB Dynasty podcast. We'll be seeing you next time. See ya.
Thank you for listening to the CFB Dynasty podcast. Help us out by subscribing on YouTube and reviewing us on your podcast network.